Hi, this is Billie Jean King.
This is Marion Bartoli.
This is Bianca Andreescu.
I'm Mats Wilander.
This is Mary Carrillo.
This is Pam Schreiber.
This is Yannick Noah, and you're listening to the Tennis Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Tennis Podcast on the penultimate day of Roland Garros 2025, a day that has seen 21-year-old Coco Gauff win her second major title and a first here on the red clay of Roland Garros. She did it with a performance that was frankly one of the most extraordinary feats of resilience and tenacity that I have ever seen on a tennis court. A dramatic 6-7, 6-2, 6-4 victory over top seed and pre-match favourite Aryna Sabalenka, a match and a result that is going to take quite a lot of digesting, and one that I haven't quite fully made sense of yet, to be honest, which is why I am thrilled and relieved to be in the company of David Law and Matt Roberts, who I hope are going to hold my hand through the analysis of this exhilarating hot mess of a tennis match and what it means. No pressure, guys.
Well, it's a good description. Hot mess is what I was going to come out with as well, and I also need some help, so it's all on you, Matt. But no, it is one of those that as it was going along, I was watching from a different vantage point, commentating on BBC Radio from up in the commentary box just below the roof there. You're a couple of floors beneath me, and I was thinking as it was going along, I really do need to talk to you about this, because I can't figure out where this is going, why it's going. I think I'm getting there with elements of it, having spoken to both the players, heard from them, but the circumstances of this match with the weather conditions, the way it undulated throughout, the twos and fros, ups and downs, and an extraordinary end result. And yeah, this is going to be a big one.
I think I enjoyed this match a lot more than most other people. Certainly a lot more than Aryna Sabalenka. We will get there.
Please don't misunderstand me, Matt. This was one of my favourite ever tennis matches. I loved it.
Why is that?
The drama.
I thought it might have been that.
Look, maybe I'm not a purist. Maybe this exposes me as not being a purist. I think fans of the podcast probably know that already. I am unashamedly almost entirely here for the drama. And that delivered in spades. I loved it.
And the first set, above all, I mean, the first set was exhilarating, I felt. Even if, the quality wasn't absolutely peak level, there was a lot of errors in there. But, as you say, the drama was incredible, on a complete knife edge right up until the final moment. And there were lots of epic points in there as well, lots of highlight moments from both players. I really enjoyed this match. I've come away with a very different feeling, I think, to a lot of people about it, who are just focusing on the number of unforced errors, and we'll have a chat about whether, how many of those unforced errors were unforced errors. And I think also from our seats in the media in the media seats on Chat 3A, we can't feel the wind. Like, it did not feel to us like the conditions were as bad as they were to the players. Obviously, we could see it with our eyes that they were having trouble, but we weren't getting it rammed down our throats. I think also maybe by commentators talking a lot about the conditions, as they would have been right to do, because it was a big factor in the match. But I just felt like I was just able to just enjoy the match for what it was. And if that had been second round of a slam with not much on the line, I probably would have focused more on the quality of it. But knowing that there was a Grand Slam title on the line and that these two were going through that, I was just engrossed and loved it.
That's how I feel as well, because to me that is quintessential Grand Slam play. On the line, the title, the trophy's sitting right there in their view. They can see this thing, and neither one of them has won it.
It's like playoff finals in football, isn't it?
Yeah,
Matt might have forgotten those, but frankly, I've forgotten them.
There's no silver medal, is there?
And they're they're almost always low-quality matches. Like, they're exhilarating and absorbing because of what's on the line, but they are rarely high-quality matches. Now,
Fulham Aston Villa 2018 dog shit match, one of the best days of my life.
Right, exactly. Look, you do get high-quality Grand Slam finals. I do realise that, but like, I think that's such a good point. Like, if this was second round of a Slam, it would matter more. I think the quality. It didn't matter to me personally at all today. I do think there might be a slight difference in that experience between having been there in the stadium and watching on TV. A lot of texts that I've had from people watching at home have really focused on the unforced error count and the hot mess element of it all. Maybe the drama and the tension and the atmosphere in the stadium, maybe that didn't quite translate through the TV. I don't know, but it permeated my skin. Like, I felt it in my veins. It was, look, generally my enjoyment of any sporting contest is directly in proportion to the amount of jeopardy experienced throughout the course of it. There are exceptions, but there wasn't a single moment of this match, really. Maybe early stages of the first set when Sabalenka was building that 4-1 double break lead. But even then, you could see the stress on her face, and the conditions were a prevailing concern for Sabalenka, even when she had that lead. I felt the hand of jeopardy on the shoulder of that tennis match throughout, and that's really all I need in life.
I was worried at 4-1, 40 love. I was really worried for this final. I thought we could be on and off this court in an hour, because it seemed to me that Coco Gauff had come out playing fine, but was just getting dominated, which is always a possibility against Aryna Sabalenka for Coco Gauff, I think, because she's a great player, Gauff, but as well as she hits her backhand, there are places to go, and when Sabalenka's on, it can just be runaway train stuff. And I thought that's what we were in for, honestly, at 4-1. I was thinking back to the final Gauff played here 3 years ago. She's a very different player now, but it was going that way. And the way that turned around, the moment that she didn't win that game, then I thought, OK, I was with you at that point, Catherine, because I'm thinking, why would you lose it at that point? Why would you have lost that lead in that game? Something's happened here. It's probably a combination of Gauff digging in, the conditions, Aryna Sabalenka missing a few, but then you just knew you were in a match. But I still wouldn't have expected the set to go the way it did. I mean, that was 20 minutes in. You're talking an hour and 17 minutes for that set.
The set to go the way it did and then not end up determining the rest of the tennis match, I find absolutely extraordinary. I mean, the barge was just absolutely losing its mind after this set.
A fun place
of
to
tennis.
be.
Yeah, somebody described it as a set that would have failed a breathalyzer test, which was just so perfect. I wrote the scrambled eggs with smoked salmon and artisanal hollandaise of tennis sets, a thing of exquisite magnificence. I decided to become a poet after that set. I loved it so much.
And there really were those two halves to it, because, I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about Aryna Sabalenka's comments after this match and how she has used the word terrible to describe her performance about 100 times, between her on-court speech and her press conference. But let's not forget, just as David says, how good she was at the start of this match. She was awesome. She seemed to have great tactics. She was using a lot of drop shots, and they were either really successful in themselves, or she was hitting passes off them. But that 4-1 40 love lead evaporated, and Gauff won 12 points in a row from there. And it started with a double fault from Sabalenka. There was another double fault in that game as well. And just dramatically, the set turned into something else from that point on. And the 5-4 game was just incredible. 2 set points for Sabalenka trying to serve it out. Again, she hit a double fault on one of them. Some of the, that whole thing of demons are always lurking. That serve cost her, I think, in that first set quite a lot today. Gauff eventually takes her 5th break point in that 5-4 game. Then Sabalenka breaks again to lead 6-5. And then Gauff breaks back for 6-all tiebreak. Of course, I knew Gauff was going to break back. There was just no chance that Sabalenka was serving that out, given the sort of state that she was in. But the tie break that Sabalenka played from 4-2 down, absolutely astonishingly good. So this idea that she can't play good tennis in those conditions is false, because she did at times play some absolutely staggering tennis today. But also she played some horrible tennis, of course, as well, and she did not seem to accept the conditions at all today, whereas Coco Gauff did. And it's so interesting how, Gauff loses that first set, and yet she came out of it the better. And
she looked the happier at the end of the set,
and
in a way.
It's almost like we mock it when tennis players talk about process, not outcome. But this actually was an example of process, not outcome, turning out to be kind of the right approach, because Sabalenka got the reward of winning the set. She had that in the bag, but she had lost so much as that set developed. She'd lost her focus, she'd lost her confidence, she'd lost her stability on the court, and Gauff had actually gained a lot. Even though she didn't end up winning the set, she gained a lot in terms of, I thought she started to hit the ball really well. She could see that Sabalenka was having a tough time down the other end, and it takes incredible mental resilience and strength, I think, to come away from that set and see it as a positive. But Gauff absolutely did. She's got an incredible way of putting disappointment behind her, and I think she took the positives from that opening set, which were that actually she was the one who was much more stable on court and used it, and actually won the second set pretty easily, and then went up a break early in the third as well. Like, the turnaround from Gauff was phenomenal.
Yeah, look, I realise that me and Coco Gauff are not the same, but if I was in her shoes, having lost that hour and 17-minute first set, I could not have waved the white flag quickly enough.
Me neither.
Okay, we've all given it everything. We know, I've got nothing more to give here. How can I possibly... what's the point? Would have been my instinctive reaction to that. I felt like losing that hour and 17-minute first set made Coco Gauff more likely to go on and win that tennis match. And that is ludicrous. It made me go and look up the quotes, the exact quotes from her after her victory over Mira Andreeva here 2 years ago, where she lost the first set on the tie-break and then ended up winning quite comfortably in the end, a pattern that we've seen a fair bit over the last couple of years. And these are quotes that we've back-referenced a few times, but they really were startling. She said, honestly, at the end of the first set, it was weird. I don't know if it was the energy she was giving off or anything. I feel like that's applicable today as well. It wasn't really anything she did, but I just had a feeling that even though I lost that set, I felt like I won it.
I can't think of anybody else really who talks like that, who believes that. Maybe Novak Djokovic in the men's game, for instance, somebody who's just seen it all, done it all, and understands long matches. But you have so little time in a best of 3 set match. She just doesn't panic, and the way she came out for the second set, the way the both of them came out for the second set, really told you something immediately. That, like, Aryna Sabalenka's a setup, and she's pissed off because this wind is a disaster, and it's not allowing me to play like I want to play, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I almost feel like it's the wrong framing of what she does to talk about it in terms of her ability to bounce back from disappointment, because it's like she doesn't experience it as disappointment. It's like she wasn't disappointed to lose that first set because she focused only on the positives of it and how close she had ended up making it. Like, I just find that resilience extraordinary. And I thought after that first set, again, I've had some texts that disagree with me on this. I thought Coco Gauff played well. Like, not relentlessly well. This was not her performance against Lois Boisson. But, for example, comparing it to her performance to win the US Open final, with which there are parallels here, obvious parallels. I thought she played way better.
You can't play classically good tennis in those conditions.
No.
But you've got to find a level that works in them. And that, I mean, she's probably incomparable. There's nobody else peerless like that.
Yeah, and look, I would have to watch the US Open match back to be sure, but my read on the two finals is the complete reverse to Aryna Sabalenka's. You know, I thought that the US Open final, when Coco Gauff won, was the one where basically Coco Gauff was running and retrieving and Aryna Sabalenka was hitting a load of unforced errors. And I went back and looked at her transcripts after that one, and she was annoyed. Like, she thought that match was on her racket, but you know, she was giving credit to Coco Gauff, whereas today she's basically giving zero credit to Coco Gauff, finding multiple ways to shade her and sort of talk about how poor she thought her performance was as well, and say that basically totally this was all on her racket. I think she's dramatically underrating what Coco Gauff did out there today. I thought Gauff was really good in this match, especially considering the conditions. I thought she served well. I thought she hit her backhand for the whole match basically brilliantly. The forehand held up, and she did retrieve well, and she did constantly get an extra ball back and put Sabalenka in uncomfortable positions. And that wasn't just because they all came off the frame, as Aryna Sabalenka has said in her press conference. I really thought Gauff, especially considering the conditions, played well today, and I didn't really come out of that US Open final thinking that. I thought that Sabalenka completely lost that one, especially with the crowds against her. But obviously Sabalenka contributed to this, and she can be... I totally understand her being critical of her own performance, but I do find the lack of grace given to Coco Gauff and the lack of praise given to Coco Gauff really pretty classless, actually, because I think Gauff did a lot well today.
Yeah, look, I think we have to get into this now, don't we? Most people will have seen her speech on the court where she mentioned tough conditions twice in her opening sentence.
And said terrible. And said this terrible match.
This terrible match, yeah. And look, having to stay on the court while they play multiple VTs celebrating the extraordinary tournament. I mean, when they started running the let's look back on a wonderful 2 weeks VT to Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, and Sabalenka put the towel over her head. I felt for her so bad. It's brutal. I think it's one of the most brutal things in tennis, that you have to stay on court in that scenario for the ceremony and all the faff that now goes with the ceremony. But there was at least one VT too many in this ceremony. So look, I think it's brutal. I think it's a tough situation. I think we remarked on it in Australia how brilliantly Sabalenka dealt with a similarly tough situation. I get the impression today hurt more. In fact, no, not the impression. I'm certain today hurt more.
She could accept it more last time,
yes,
because she knows that Keys hit a hot streak and won the title in that way.
So look, I think we all raised an eyebrow at her comments on the court, you know, mentioning the conditions a lot and calling it a terrible match and not really paying a lot of tribute to Coco Gauff. But we thought, look, that's not ideal, but cut her some slack. This is one of the most brutal moments of her life. Then she comes into the press conference, and albeit she comes in quickly, you know, she's not in a settled frame of mind, but boy, does she double down on those comments. And there's no way around the fact that these are pretty, well, graceless, to use Matt's words. She says sometimes it felt like she, Gauff, was hitting the ball on the frame and it magically landed in. It felt like a joke, like someone was throwing things at me to see if I could handle it. She won the match not because she played incredible, but because I made those mistakes. Iga would have won this match.
That wound up Gauff, that last line, didn't it? Because that was put to Gauff, and she said, well, I don't really think that's fair. You know, and she actually said she sort of was more worried about playing Sabalenka than playing Świątek today, and she was quick to sort of say, Swiatek's a great player too, but look, Sabalenka's been dominating the tour. That was the one that Gauff has heard. I wonder what she'll think when she hears some of the others.
And the way Gauff was prepared to bite on that question in a very graceful way, but it was Itamar's question, wasn't it? Very well put in the way she didn't kind of bat it away and go, look, I'm sure Aryna's just hurting right now. Let's not. She very gently did bite. It genuinely made me wonder if there's beef between these two. Like, I don't know. My head is saying, who could possibly have beef with Coco Gauff? Like, surely that's impossible. But I found this weird.
I personally, I don't know. Maybe there is beef. But I think it's not that surprising that two players at the very top of the game who are trying to take each other's glory away from each other are not going to be able to necessarily always handle it and be a bit irritated by the other one in the match, in the press conference, in the interviews, etc. I do think they do an extraordinary job generally, given that, when we've organised flash interviews, you don't go and ask the loser to talk, but you do on the bloody final day. And that which I find astonishing, really, that the player does, and I think it is the right thing that they do, but it is really hard. And I would just slot in that she did give credit to Gauff for winning that match in that trophy ceremony speech. She did say she handled it a lot better than I did. She also said a lot of other things. She definitely said that about the frame and effectively the luck and it all being kind of unfair. And she couldn't handle it. The bottom line is she just couldn't handle it. And I don't mind that too much. I think it was all those things that you say, but I also get it. I mean, why would she not be pissed off? She's just lost a Grand Slam final. Of course she is.
Yeah. The thing is, though, I thought that this kind of Aryna Sabalenka had been left behind. I was very surprised by her performance today. I was surprised by those quotes in the press conference, and ultimately I think that kind of attitude is why she lost this match.
Oh, I agree with you. And I'm very reluctant to use emotional management when I'm talking about women's tennis, because I want to make sure that you don't go down that stereotype. But if you look at the match that we've just seen, one of the players handled it and the other one didn't.
When things get stressful for Aryna Sabalenka, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, when she had an incredible record of reaching the latter stages of slams but not getting over the line, she would revert to just keep hitting and hitting. And I thought that she had enough texture in her game now and enough layers to her game that in that situation again against Coco Gauff in a Grand Slam final, she would just be able to fall back on that a little more and just play better, even in tough conditions. But it was like Gauff, who we know stresses her out on the court with her movement and with her legs, and the pressure of a Grand Slam final was just kind of too much. And it's fascinating because it's always interesting when your biggest superpower is also your Achilles heel, and that's what I think what we're seeing here with Sabalenka. Like, her ability to dominate and play matches on her terms and think that everything is kind of on her racket is absolutely, when she's at her best, what sets her apart. But it also means she takes everything on herself and kind of sees everything as her fault, and it's harder to accept when things are going against her. And I think if she'd had an attitude on court today that was, okay, these conditions are tough, but I've got to do what I can in them, and Coco Gauff is handling them really well, this match was still there for her to win today. And
Coco Gauff found those conditions tough too.
Right.
She said some shots felt awful today. She said that wasn't pretty, but I got the job done. She hated it too.
Yeah. So and
that's her superpower.
Right. And I'm a bit shocked actually by what we saw from Sabalenka today. I maybe naively, but I thought that this Sabalenka was left in 2022 and 2023 and in those other losses that she'd had. We haven't seen this sort of Sabalenka for such a sustained period in a match. Like, going from 4-1 to 4-all in the first set didn't necessarily surprise me all that much. I thought, okay, she'll get it back, and then she won the set. I thought, okay. But then for it to continue in sets 2 and 3 really did shock me from a Sabalenka perspective.
The element in her quotes of the taking responsibility, there's an interesting tension in there, because on one hand, she's taking kind of too much responsibility, isn't she? She's being way too hard on herself.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the constant references to the conditions and she handled them better than me, that is also kind of a shield to total responsibility, isn't it? It reminds me of sort of the way that Alexander Zverev sort of tries to have a semblance of taking responsibility sometimes. And look, I think this is different. I do think Sabalenka will self-examine in a way that Alexander Zverev won't, and I do think she's self-critical in a way that he isn't. And I'm sorry to her to make that comparison, but yeah, I did feel like, yes, you're taking responsibility, but also constantly bringing up the conditions, which were the same for both players, is also a deflection from that responsibility. And look, I agree with everything you say, David, about all of the sort of compassionate reasons why we should give Sabalenka grace about what she said about Coco Gauff. I think saying she got lucky is crossing a sporting line. I think that's pretty low.
And I dare say,
even in the circumstances.
I'd be interested to ask her about it the next time we see her, in hindsight, because I wonder whether she might agree. It was interesting reading the quotes of her coach, who did a press conference the day before, who kind of referenced this inner struggle that Sabalenka has, and they don't shy away from it. And he said, we always tell her, don't fight it, but also don't feed it. And I'm afraid she did both of those two things today in every way. And I think that they probably will have to analyse it. And the truth is, she may never get over it completely. It may be a constant process of management, because if you think back, what was it, a couple of years ago, she lost that big lead against Karolina Muchova. She's lost the set lead to Coco Gauff in the US Open final, and now this. It is something that's happened a lot. She's been so bloody good that she hasn't been in those struggles maybe that often recently, and I do think, I agree with you. I mean, she's clearly aware of it, so she's worked on it and she's matured and she's got better. But break it all down, and if Coco Gauff is able to get to her enough, it's still who she is inside, and it's her weak points.
Yeah, she's had another terrible performance for me against Coco in the final, and I was kind of like, well, what's the common denominator there? It's Coco Gauff. Like, you've got to give, I think, a lot of credit to Coco Gauff for making Sabalenka feel like that. And look, I do get it in the moment. As you said, it was quick that she came into press, but I think there was a way to criticise her own performance today without taking away from Coco Gauff. And I feel like she did that both on court and in the press conference, and I didn't love that.
Was this the match that killed the unforced error statistic? Charlie Eccleshare's, Charlie and Matt Futterman have written a piece together on The Athletic. I mean, there'll be oodles of content on The Athletic and in the New York Times about this, but Charlie called unforced errors the most unsatisfactory statistic in tennis, because the situation, the conditions, the opponent are always an influencing factor. Look, maybe this is a branding issue with that statistic, like calling it unforced suggests that it happens in a vacuum, but that is never more so the case than when Coco Gauff is involved in a tennis match. And I do almost think kind of the flashing up of unforced error statistics at the end of a set and at the end of a match are creating a climate in which tennis and certainly Aryna Sabalenka today, is encouraged to underestimate Coco Gauff. Because winning is winning. Like, making your opponent play badly, especially when the opponent is Aryna Sabalenka, who is so clearly and unarguably the best player in the world when she plays well. Like, for Coco Gauff, if Sabalenka plays well, it doesn't matter how well Coco Gauff plays. Sabalenka's winning. Like, she's a better tennis player. So making Sabalenka not play well is a totally legitimate tactic. It's potentially the only tactic, and it wins you tennis matches. And winning is the only metric. And
most people can't do it.
Right.
Like, if it was so easy to make Sabalenka play badly, people would be doing it. But it kind of seems to be Coco Gauff who's got that in her. Like, others don't, and that's why Sabalenka wins so many matches on tour, because, as you say, her best tennis at the moment pretty much is the best. You know, she can dominate matches, but she can't do that so easily against Coco Gauff. You know, she beat her in Madrid, but you know, you didn't hear Coco Gauff going on about the Madrid conditions after that match, which favour Aryna Sabalenka. You know, and Coco Gauff made that second set pretty close, didn't she, in Madrid? And look, it was close today. Sabalenka still could have won. But, yeah, it's a real skill that Coco Gauff has. And I felt today like she did it by playing well herself. I really did. Like, yes, she was moving brilliantly. We always expect that. But I also felt like she was striking the ball with quite a lot of conviction. There'd be many Coco Gauff matches where you might make a sort of comment about the frame and it going in. I just didn't think today was the one.
Yeah, there was an irony in that, wasn't there?
I'm afraid, I think you really have to take what Aryna Sabalenka's saying with a pinch of salt. I mean, I don't think any observer would really be able to see it like that, because it's not true. She just couldn't handle it, and I get that.
Charlie also called this match not a classic, which, while potentially objectively true, I take issue with, because it is a Catherine Whitaker classic.
Well, I think that's fair.
It was an incredible celebration from Coco Gauff, wasn't it? It was a really, really special moment.
She showed how much she's holding in the match. You know, what was it, 2.5 hours, where you think she's fine. Oh, she's just, you know, she's got this all under control. And I've seen this before with so many great champions. Pete Sampras, players like this, who would just, you wouldn't see a flicker. She's like a throwback in that way. And then suddenly the moment of victory releases the emotion, releases the sort of stress. And they're able to just let you in on the secret that all along they were hanging on by their fingernails, and she's as strong as, and you know, that saying, victory belongs to the most tenacious. I mean, whether you like that or not, this woman has tenacity like few others in terms of just being competitive, hanging in there, and yes, that reaction was of somebody who has just gone through it and come out on top. It's great to see.
And I enjoyed her comments in the press conference about sort of how much Roland Garros has kind of maybe always been the one that she'd thought she'd have the best chance of winning. And I think why I really liked that was because I do feel like over the past 4 years or so, she has been the second best player at Roland Garros. She's lost to Iga Swiatek 3 years in a row here prior to this. And it did sort of remind me a little bit today of Federer winning here when, you know, Nadal was out the way and he beat Robin Söderling, who'd beaten Nadal, and here Coco Gauff, Iga Swiatek's out the way and she's beaten Aryna Sabalenka, who beat Iga Swiatek. There was a little parallel there that I enjoyed, and I'm just pleased that Coco Gauff has a Roland Garros, because she is a great clay courter, and she's found the matchup with Swiatek difficult here. Pretty much everyone has, but she absolutely seized her opportunity. And I also liked the way she said in her press conference, I'd have kind of fancied my chances against even Iga Swiatek today as well.
And I actually I think that's quite significant. I mean, I think Coco Gauff, she's got enough perspective on life that not beating Iga Swiatek to win this title wouldn't matter to her, kind of whatever the weather. But and speaking of weather, it is we're under a parasol here that David is having to hold down with his brute strength. It's pouring rain, and it's windy, and it's
terrible conditions. We can't podcast in these.
Champions adjust, folks. What was I saying? Something about Coco Gauff. Oh dear. She would have won whatever the weather, but I think the fact that if she'd won Roland Garros with the record that she had against Iga Swiatek a year ago, maybe they'd have felt like slightly, I've entered a cheat code here by not having to face her. But she was very quick to point out when that Sabalenka quote about Iga would have won today was put to her in the press conference today by our colleague Itamar. She said, well, I beat her in Rome.
In straight sets.
Yeah, in straight sets. She was really bullish about it. Like, she doesn't feel like she's got anything to prove against Iga Swiatek anymore, and I'm pleased that she feels that way about it. I really am. And it's just something so healthy about Coco Gauff and her self-esteem and the way she wants it so much, but she doesn't need it. It's like she's achieved what Madison Keys managed to achieve in Australia, but without going through the turmoil. And I know there has been turmoil. She referenced it in her on-court speech today about how low she felt after losing the final here to Iga Swiatek 3 years ago. How many doubts she had, how many dark moments. But I mean, I felt like she's always had this steely core of self-esteem where she hasn't doubted whether she's enough without a Grand Slam title.
She knows who she is, and one of the things she said in the press conference was that her understanding of who she is helped her to process the disappointments in the match. How bad can it get? I feel like I'm doing the right thing, so I'm not going to beat myself up. That was the big difference between the two players, their perspective. She's quite amazing, really.
And the deftness and grace with which she handled some of the questions in that press conference. She was asked about being an American and standing on the podium, which is the way they do the ceremony here. And it is cool that they stand on the podium and the national anthem is played and the flag is raised. It takes too long for them to construct that podium, and a lot of faff takes place while they're doing it.
Yeah, it made me feel a bit bad how much I have criticised the construction of that podium in the past, because hearing Gauff say, it was great standing up there, you feel like you're on top of the world, I was like, I want you to feel on top of the world, and if a podium is what it takes, then I guess I can live with it.
Yeah, that quote was a blow for the anti-faff brigade. I will accept that. But she was asked about standing there on that podium on an international stage with the national anthem played, and how she felt about that, being a representative for the United States of America at the moment. And Donald Trump was not mentioned in the question, nor the answer from Coco Gauff. It was incredibly deftly handled by her, because she made her stance and what she stands for incredibly clear. There was no equivocation, and yet, I don't think Donald Trump is going to be tweeting, I hate Coco Gauff tomorrow, which is what he does when somebody, directly pisses him off. Maybe when you're listening to this, I'll be proven wrong. But she talked about being a representation of people who look like me. She said, it's important to me being a representation of hope and light at the moment in America. And she talked about how after the election at the end of last year, she experienced a real down period. And she said, my mum said to me before the WTA finals at the end of last season, when I was feeling really down about, the political climate in America, she said, go out there and give Americans that look like you something to be hopeful about. And she did. She went out there and won it. And God, she's amazing, isn't she? She's 21. She's 21 and she's always talked like this. She talked like this when she was 17, 16, 15.
Never ceases to amaze me. When it's 6 years since she was that 15-year-old on Wimbledon centre court beating Venus Williams. And, she's still only 21. Feels like she's been around forever. Couple of Grand Slams. Who knows where next?
You say that, David, in a very glib way, but you know my question is where next?
Yeah. Well, I am fascinated to see her on grass again, and coming in as the champion, the most recent champion. What's that going to do for her? I suspect that's going to do a lot for her in terms of her self-belief and her kind of just poise. I mean, she's always had poise, but it's that champion's poise of just believing in it with every fibre. I'm also fascinated to see what Aryna Sabalenka will do off the back of this. She told me, in answer to my question, she's going to go and have some tequila. And
alcohol and sugar.
Yeah, tequila and gummy bears. My flight to Mykonos is booked. That was the upside of the Aryna Sabalenka press conference. Yeah, I'm pleased she's going on that journey.
And look, she's withstood and dealt with disappointments before. I have no doubt the competitor that she is,
her resilience.
She is going to come out fighting, and I love it.
I agree with you. Like, I don't think this will derail her long term. I do think she'll process this and she'll figure it out and come back stronger. But the turnaround between the French Open and Wimbledon is so tight. Will she be able to do that healing in that shorter space of time?
I think it'll help. I think it'll help for her to have something positive to focus on rather than just dwelling on this. Because even Aryna Sabalenka, as ferocious a competitor as she is, she said earlier this year she was having a little bit of trouble getting up for some of these events. She won't have any trouble getting up for Wimbledon. Don't forget she missed it last year with a shoulder injury. She was so gutted about that. I think she'll be ready for it, roaring for it. I think the bigger question is, can she solve this problem that she's got inside when she gets frustrated? I think that this is still happening. This is the most egregious example of it probably that we've ever seen from her, and I think she could lose more Grand Slam title matches if she doesn't figure this out.
Would you pick Aryna Sabalenka to win Wimbledon?
Yeah.
Sitting here right now?
I would, yeah.
She'd be your favourite?
I still think her game ultimately should work there.
Would you?
I think I would as well. That's the thing. Like, I do completely take your point, Catherine, about how, if ever a match might leave some scar tissue, it feels like this one right there. And yet, I look at the field and I do think Sabalenka, with her game on the grass, should be the favourite there. And she's done. I said there, her resilience. I do think it is incredibly strong. She's lost some big finals this year, and then the Australian Open was as big as this as well, but some other ones as well, and come out a week or two later and looked fantastic. And Gauff, I just think, on the grass, look, she's absolutely in the mix to win the title, but I'd be interested to just see if players can get at her a little bit more on the grass, where her movement and her athleticism is obviously a big strength still, and Mary Carrillo always talks about the best athletes winning Wimbledon, but on that faster surface, can she be rushed a little more? I just will be interested to see. I would probably, despite what we've seen today, still have Sabalenka a little bit ahead of Gauff in the Wimbledon pecking order, but I don't think there's a very clear favourite at Wimbledon on the women's side. I mean, I do think Sabalenka is it, but today raises some question marks for sure.
It's funny, I so associate Coco Gauff with Wimbledon because it's where she had the breakthrough. I have such an incredible memory of us standing on that bench to try and get a glimpse of her on the big screen behind the hill, waiting to record the podcast until she was finished. I think that was her second round match third round against Polona Herzog. Yeah, and just the fever that Wimbledon got wrapped up in about Coco Gauff. So just the default position in my head is Coco Gauff, Wimbledon. It makes sense, but there's also that loss to Emma Navarro last year was, that wasn't great, and obviously there's going to be a lot of pressure on her this year, although I think she'll cope with that just fine. But before that, the first round loss to Sophia Kenin, like, her record actually hasn't been quite what we would have expected after her breakthrough.
I think a big sort of learning for me this year with Coco Gauff is accepting that there are, I think, are going to continue to just be ups and downs, and she's never as much in the trenches as we think she is. Like, if you'd said to me during the United Cup she will win a slam this year, I'd have said, of course. Like, look at how great her tennis is, look at how great it was at the back end of last season. That feels like Grand Slam winning tennis. If you'd said to me when she was losing to, Magda Linette in Miami and just generally really struggling with her form and her game, she'll win the next slam, and I thought, that seems unlikely. And yet, here she is standing with the trophy at the next slam. And yeah, her ability both within matches but also within the season as a whole to kind of accept disappointment and learn from it and move on from it, and just continue to bring it, and like, it's pretty remarkable. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't think she's going to be a player who totally dominates the tour, because I do think the serve and to some extent the forehand as well are areas where she's going to have bad weeks with them and players are going to be able to exploit them. But equally, like, becoming a multiple major champion, that's a big deal to me. Like, getting 2 instead of 1, it just feels like she can keep doing this now, like, because she's so good, she's got so many attributes. She can impose herself on some players, she can cause top players to not play so well as well. Like, I don't think she stops here, and that doesn't feel like a big bold take. She's 21. Like, I definitely think there are more majors in her future, but there are times with Gauff when you watch her play and you kind of think, oh God, like, the game's a disaster. Will she ever come back from this? But the learning is that, yeah, she will, because she's Coco Gauff.
It's a good vibe, isn't it? Coco Gauff winning a slam. Like, I really like Aryna Sabalenka.
Yeah.
I do, and I think she's been brilliant this fortnight. Like, really lit up the place, and I would have been really pleased for her to win. It would have been a great story. Her going into Wimbledon on for the career slam. Like, there were good stories and vibes either way, but there is something very special about Coco Gauff. And I hope Patrick Mouratoglou is ruminating on that right now. No stars in women's tennis.
Yeah, and that was as outrageous and ridiculous a statement as I've heard from anybody all this fortnight.
Yeah. Literally coach of Naomi Osaka.
Yeah, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Elise Cornet's face was one of my favourite things about the tournament in response to that.
Yeah, big Catherine Whittaker energy in that facial expression. Well done, Elise. Well done, Coco Gauff. And an extraordinary and uplifting victory here at Roland Garros. A privilege to watch. And that is it for part 1, but we'll be back in part 2 to talk about some other pretty dramatic things that happened here on day 14 of the French Open. But friends, before we move on to part 2, we just do want to take a moment to remind you about something very exciting that we've got coming up next week and the week after. It's hard to believe that this time in 48 hours we'll be getting back to the UK, immediately putting our TVs on and switching it to tennis and seeing crisp green grass courts. It is such a wild and fun transition from grass to clay. And this year we are not just covering the grass court season how we usually do here on the Tennis Podcast. Don't worry, we are doing that. But we are also joining the Tennis Channel team for live coverage of the HSBC Championships at the Queen's Club. David and I are going to be doing commentary together.
Yes, we are, on 2 separate weekends of tennis, because they've added the women's event to the men's event there, which is great news. I'm really excited to see the women return to the Queen's Club, because they used to play the event there some 50 years ago. So that's going to be great. And yes, you and I will be side by side.
yes, Donovecic's Instagram is full of posts from Queens, and it's just great seeing women on the grass courts of the Queen's Club. And the three of us will also be doing an hour-long rap show for 8 days over the course of the fortnight.
Yes, that's rap with a W. Very, very crucially, we'll be doing them...
That's like, what have I signed up for?
We'll be doing them after the last 4 days of the women's event, and then after the last 4 days of the men's event as well. So hopefully people can join us to watch those.
Yeah, Matt rapping. Not guaranteeing it, but not ruling it out either. You can catch it all live on the Tennis Channel app from first ball to last. Every match, every court, and yes, all with added tennis podcast. Our coverage will be available in the UK and the US, and we hope you can join us. We are very excited. See you then. Welcome back to part 2 of the tennis podcast, where we are now sitting in sort of a monsoon.
Yep. I'm really holding this umbrella very tight now. Are you getting dripped on, Matt? A little bit.
Little bit, but we power on.
Yeah, champions adjust. Folks, Tokito Oda, the incredible Tokito Oda, beat poor old Alfie Hewett in the men's wheelchair singles final 6-4, 7-6 earlier on today. It's a third Roland Garros title for Oda. His star quality is off the charts. That, I mean, the way he plays tennis for starters, but he has real main character and energy. He's got that racket guitar celebration. He just jumps through the screen at you, doesn't he? I know he's a big deal in Japan, but he can be a really big deal for wheelchair tennis.
Yeah, it's hard to believe he is just 19 years of age, the way he carries himself. And he's been doing this for a couple of years. You know, this isn't brand new. And his rivalry with Alfie Hewett is fabulous. They had the Paralympic final last year where they both had these incredible chances, and they had the 15,000 people in the stadium in Court Philippe Chatrier. They had the rematch, which Hewett won and avenged that loss at the Australian Open, and then he brings his left-handed hitting partner with him here, and it's still not enough, not quite, because Oda, he is just box office.
Yeah, 5th Grand Slam title for him. He'll be going for a second title at Wimbledon next month, and then he'll be trying to complete the career slam at the US Open. He's never got past the quarterfinals there, so that's going to be huge for him. The calendar slam is off for Alfie Hewett. Obviously, he won in Australia. He looked absolutely gutted today, absolutely gutted, which I think makes it all the more incredible that he and partner Gordon Reid have come back and beaten Oda.
Oh, wow.
And his partner Stefan Uday in the men's wheelchair doubles final. Like,
that's great.
Incredible to have to bounce back from that disappointment and in the same day come back and play the doubles final. 6-4, 1-6, 10-7 in the deciding tiebreak. So well done to Alfie Hewett and Gordon Reid. In the women's wheelchair singles, Yui Kimiji, the top seed, beat Aniek van Koot 6-2, 6-2 in the final. It's her 5th Roland Garros title, Kimiji, but her first since 2020. And at Wimbledon, she'll be going for the 3rd leg of the calendar slam. She won Australia, she's won here, and she'll be going for the career slam. It's the only one missing from her CV. So Wimbledon is going to be huge for Yui Kimiji, and we will be following her progress very closely. The quad wheelchair singles was won for the 2nd year in a row by Israeli Guy Sasson. He beat top seed Niels Vink 6-4, 7-5 in the final. He's a bit of a clay court specialist, Guy Sasson. He's got 2 major titles in singles and 1 in doubles, and they've all come here at Roland Garros. And in the juniors event, the boys final was an all-German affair. Both 17-year-olds. We have another Niels McDonald, born in Cardiff. Can we claim him? You know the Brits are going to start.
One of our own.
The Brits are going to start rocking up at his press conference saying, "So tell me about your connections to Cardiff, Niels." He beat Max Schoenhaus 6-7, 6-love, 6-3 in the boys' final today. And in the girls' singles final, the unseeded 17-year-old Austrian Lily Tagger, great name, beat 16-year-old Brit Hannah Klugman 6-2, 6-love in the final. Bit of a beat down there. Look, Hannah Klugman is... she's a huge talent, no doubt. But Lily Tagger, if you're thinking, where have I Where have I heard that name before? Matt?
Yeah, she was on my list of names that you haven't heard who had beaten Loïs Boisson this season. Got a win over her a few weeks ago. And yeah, has a one-handed backhand, does Lily Tagger, has fellow one-handed backhander Francesca Schiavone in her coaching box. And yeah, Simon Briggs, who watched this match and was very, very taken with her game. And JJ of BBC Sport was using the phrase "moves like Tagger."
It's good, isn't it? You can't argue with that.
Like, let's hope she becomes a thing.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be
I
enjoyable.
wanted to hate it, but I can't deny I love it. So there we go. Congratulations to them. That is it for part 2. We'll be back in part 3 to talk about Sinner, which David hates.
Correct.
Welcome back to part 3 of the tennis podcast, where we're looking ahead to the final day of Roland Garros 2025. We're doing it in a monsoon.
Yeah, we're huddled together on our own on a bit of decking, which is all soaking
It's
wet.
flooded, yeah.
We're surrounded by tables that have all got standing water on them, and the rain is lashing down, and I'm holding onto an umbrella trying to keep it over us.
Yeah, all of our equipment and ourselves will be lost if David lets go of the parasol. The podcast will be lost. If you're hearing this now, it's because David successfully held on to the parasol.
What a hero.
Absolutely. Folks, Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz are going to meet in a Grand Slam final for the first time tomorrow. I'm very excited for this match. I'm excited for the masculine dancing in the opening ceremony. We had feminine dancing today. Didn't love it. David, you didn't mind it?
Listen, I wish it was. It wasn't sort of organised the way it was and promoted the way it was, but actually I thought the performance was great. I enjoyed it.
Of course, David is more generous and optimistic than me. It made me really angry. Anyway.
That came across.
It's like this is what they think is feminism. Sending some women out to dance to an orchestral version of Shake It Off. No, you've just ruined Shake It Off for me. Anyway, excited for the masculine dancing, which will introduce this match, and excited for the match. There's so many unstoppable force meeting immovable object elements to this match. Neither has ever lost a Grand Slam final. Something is going to give tomorrow.
Yeah. Absolutely. And look, I think Sinner has been, to my mind, a little more convincing through this tournament. I think Alcaraz has dropped sets, hasn't he? Sinner hasn't dropped any. Alcaraz in the last couple of rounds, obviously Mazzetti couldn't finish that match. Tommy Paul was clearly injured as well. I just feel like we haven't seen Alcaraz go up against a really top fellow rival at their best in this tournament, whereas Sinner's just come through Novak Djokovic. And yet, as I so often am on these occasions, I'm drawn to picking Carlos Alcaraz to win the match and the title. I just think that sort of chaos energy that Alcaraz can bring to the match and bring to rallies is really, really powerful. We've seen it in his recent meetings with Sinner. I think it unsettles Sinner a little bit. The variety that he has, the changes of pace, the changes of heights, the changes of spins, all of this is crucial for Alcaraz tomorrow. So I think I'm going to end up picking Alcaraz, but look, it would be fascinating to me if we ended up in a fifth set, and it feels like that's a big chance of that happening. Because then we'll have the Alcaraz record on the line in terms of how great his fifth set record is, having only ever lost one. and that being, before he was the famous Carlos Alcaraz.
Will that end up being at the top of Matteo Berrettini's CV? The only man to ever win a fifth set against the famous Carlos Alcaraz.
I mean, if I was Berrettini at the end of tomorrow's match, if Alcaraz wins it in 5, I would be doing a social media video of myself moonwalking.
You'd be doing the alley
Italian Jannik Sinner.
The alley shuffle, Rinderknecht style.
Yeah.
Can you just do that anyway, David? I'd really like to see that. But, so that would be that record up against Sinner's record, which I just want to know how much of a thing it is. Because...
And why? What is it again?
So it's 0-6 he is in matches stretching beyond 3 hours and 50 minutes. He's never won one of those. Once we've got past that threshold in terms of time in a tennis match, he's never won one. Now, I do wonder whether this is one of a sort of misleading tennis stats, because
I think it is,
because I've seen him play incredibly well, like against Carlos Alcaraz in that 5th set in the US Open.
He had a match point, didn't he?
He had a match point. It was over 5 hours, and he was awesome down the stretch. But on the other hand, we have also seen him have some physical issues in matches. That is undeniable. Against Holger Rune this year at the Australian Open, against Zverev at the US Open. There are other examples as well, but I just kind of want to know how much of a thing it is.
Yeah.
And I think putting that on the line against Alcaraz's 5th set record, which we know, we've got a lot of evidence that that's as good as it gets, that to me would be a fascinating place for this final to be in. And it's hard for me to imagine either one of them winning this match without the other one getting a couple of sets as well, because they're both so good. I think they'll both have moments in this match where they're outplaying the other, because that's how good they both are. So, if you can't tell in the tone of my voice, I'm very, very excited for this one, as I think just like everyone in tennis is. It's been almost 4 years since their first meeting, and they've shared the last 5 slams between them. So it feels like the time is now for them to meet in a Grand Slam final, and can't wait.
Will it be a classic?
Listen, I think
question.
There's no question it has the potential to be a classic, because we've seen classics from them. That US Open night we witnessed, I think you were presenting on TV that day, Catherine, and Matt and I were watching in the stand together, and we watched the first 2 or 3 sets together there. Then we raced off to the bus so we could get back and watch the last part of it in the apartment. I mean, we were literally jumping out of our skin watching that, high-fiving each other, shouting at 2 a.m, waking people up. I wanted to wake people up at home so that they could experience what we were experiencing. The potential is there for it to be that. The potential is also there for it to be crap. Because a year ago, we said, what if it's crap? And
was it crap a year
went
ago?
5 sets, Catherine.
But
It was a dog's dinner. Neither one of them played well at the same time.
It wasn't crap, I don't think.
But it was disappointing.
It was disappointing.
It was as it was going along, I was thinking, I'm not that into it.
It was crap relative to expectations and hype.
And I really do think it's about how players... I mean, Carlos Alcaraz managed to win the French Open last year without playing that well.
That's what I was going to say. I think he's in better form this year.
I think they both are. And I think
sure.
Sinner's a different player now. So, listen, honestly, optimist that I am, I think we're going to get the format. I think we're going to be jumping out of our skin. I think we're going to be high-fiving in the press box, quietly, because you're not allowed to. But no, I think we're in for an absolute belter, and I just love the fact that everybody is so up for this, because when you start to lose the greats of the game the way the sport has over the last few years, and this ain't my first rodeo. I've lost Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi, or we've lost Chris Evert and Martin Everett, because that's life. They have to retire sometime. To see the next generation come through and be as exciting in terms of potential and something you want to hype up. I just love that.
That feels, I mean, no notes. That feels like a really fitting end to today's podcast, except it's not the end, because we have a mascot.
Hey!
What a mascot. Hello to Kevin. I love it when dogs have human names.
Hi, Kev.
Hello, Kevin. Kevin is owned by Jason Brady, and Kevin is proud to be a second-time tennis podcast mascot. He's a 5-year-old terrier hound mix living with his dads, Jason and Peter, in Brooklyn. He enjoys snacks, don't we all? I undersnacked for today's final. I will be rectifying that tomorrow. Lessons learned. He loves snacks, long naps. Oh, it's describing me. Causing mischief and going to his doggy camp in the Pocono Mountains. I know the Poconos from The Office. They're referenced in the US Office.
Good knowledge.
Yeah, thank goodness, because I would have pronounced that totally wrong if I weren't a devotee of the US Office. Kevin is, well, delightful. A terrier hound mix. That means he's probably very clever and mischievous. And you've said that causing mischief is one of his faves. So yeah, I reckon he probably makes you tear your hair out, but in a sort of Holger Rune way, you know. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
I feel like Kevin's going to email us and say, oh my God, you compared my dog to Holger Rune. I meant it in the most positive possible way. Holger Rune's book, by the way, is about to be published in English. Big
One of them, anyway.
One of the two. I think it's the one.
Of 2 books.
I think it's the one that I own in Danish.
You just said that Kevin's going to email you. Kevin's the dog.
You can see where that went wrong. Jason, email me. I said that Terrier Hound Mix is likely to be smart, David. Anyway, thank you to Jason and Kevin. Thank you to our mascots. Phoebe, hello. David and Maisie, hello. Roger for Matt, hello. How big are your paws? Hello to our top folks and executive producers, Greg, Chris and Jeff. Matt, please compose yourself. We need some shout-outs.
Yeah, well, shout out David for continuing to hold up the parasol.
Yeah.
And also Noreen Riley.
Hi, Noreen.
Robbinsville, New Jersey.
I'm wearing my Bruce t-shirt today.
Yeah, Bruce is on stage as we
right
speak.
now, potentially with Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, he's
pretty
playing
cool.
Anfield again.
That's great. Thanks, Noreen.
Thank
I
you.
think we've had Noreen before.
I think you're right.
I think so too, and I think we failed to come up with the tennis Noreen before.
I think you're right as well. But Noreen has some lovely things to say. Noreen says, it's hard to believe there was a time in my life when I wasn't regaling my husband about the latest Ostapenko antics. So thank you to the Tennis Podcast for indoctrinating me into the world of tennis.
You're very welcome, Noreen.
You're one of us, Noreen.
Yeah.
Love that.
We've also got Ingrid Holmberg,
Hello, Ingrid.
Hi, Ingrid.
who is from Victoria in Canada.
Uh-huh.
And Ingrid says, my earliest tennis memories are watching the men's and women's finals from Wimbledon on TV in the early mid-1960s.
Wow.
Like
Ingrid Lofthal-Benzer,
Yes.
one of the founding members of the WTA, who, when we were sitting in right this spot in significantly better conditions a few days ago, came over and gave us a lovely greeting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she is fun. Ingrids are fun.
Yeah.
And finally, we have Catherine L.
Oh, Catherine's are fun too.
from Sydney.
How are we
Hang on,
spelling it?
is this L as in an initial or like E-double-L-E?
L as in an initial.
Oh, mysterious.
And I like this from Catherine. My first memory of tennis was when I went to the primary school library to return a book just before class started. The librarian had the TV on and was watching highlights of Pat Rafter versus Goran Ivanisevic. She explained the game of tennis to me, the scoring, the players, and the tournament of Wimbledon. She explained how Rafter was so close to making history for Australia. I've forgotten the librarian's name, but will forever be grateful that we shared that moment.
What a way to start your tennis
So
watching career.
great.
Isn't that great?
I love that. What church and what pew are we?
Same church, same pew.
Oh, the best pew. Catherine Ingrid and Noreen, thank you ever so much. Thank you to all of our friends of the Tennis Podcast. Thank you, Kevin, the dog. I know it's the dog. Thank you to The Athletic. We are proudly part of the Athletic Podcast Network. We have one more daily Roland Garros podcast to go. David has let go of the parasol.
Just briefly, I just wanted to get some feeling back in my hand.
Just a few more seconds, David. Thank you for your service. Thank you for listening. It's been a great day. It's been a great tournament. One more to go. We'll speak to you tomorrow.